feminists began dreaming of the ultimate victory, to sweep away nearly all remaining discriminatory laws in one grand gesture, by passing the Equal Rights Amendment.
There were hundreds and hundreds of laws that were based on sex. To go one by one, we figured out it would take 485 years. So clearly it needed to be a constitutional principle.
We've been hearing a lot about the Equal Rights Amendment, and it's about time. After all, it's been half a century since women began fighting for this amendment. It would make the Constitution apply fully to women for the first time.
Just 24 words long, the ERA had had a long and tortured legislative history. First proposed in 1923, it was reintroduced in every Congress since, but rarely even reached the floor for a vote. But in 1972, with the help of women's newfound political strength, the ERA finally won overwhelming passage in both houses of Congress. Like any constitutional amendment, the ERA still needed one more step: the approval of 2/3 of the states.
In order for the Equal Rights Amendment to become the 27th Amendment to the Constitution, 38 states must ratify it by March of 1979.
Feminists from every walk of life mobilized to convince each state legislature to pass the amendment.
Let the Congress listen. We are here. We are Americans, and we will not be denied.
Help pass ERA.
Help pass ERA.
After 30 states ratified the amendment within a year, feminists were certain that victory was inevitable.
There is absolutely nothing that ERA will do for women.
But the fight to ratify the ERA was about to come up against a changing political climate and one of the most canny and effective opponents feminists had ever faced.
The main trouble with the feminist movement is that it teaches women to be victims, that they are victims of the patriarchy. And I think that's ridiculous. I think American women are the most fortunate class of people who ever lived on the face of the earth.
Now, I thought what I might do is to run through the arguments that we present against the Equal Rights Amendment.
I think Phyllis Schlafly tapped into the feeling that many women had. Things were changing too fast. What was going to happen? Were they going to be taken care of?
I want my children to look up to their daddy. I want them to know that he is the head of the house, that he can take care of me and them, that he can protect us. That's what we've got him for. That's why I married him, to be protected.
I would like to thank my husband, Fred, for letting me come today. I love to say that because it irritates the women's livers more than anything that I say.
To many feminists, Schlafly was at best a contradiction, and at worst, a hypocrite.
She didn't know she was a feminist. You know, she ran a movement. She was rarely home. She was on the road all the time, and she had the support of other women who helped raise her children and an understanding husband, and yet she railed against women wanting that for themselves.
I used to say to her, I think I've fixed more dinners at home than you have.
As the deadline for passage approached, feminists readied for the final push at an historic conference in Houston, Texas.
The conference brings delegates from all over the country to Houston, and it brings them with real drama, someone carrying a torch just like the Olympics, all the way from Seneca Falls, where the first women's conference was held, all the way to Texas.
There were 3 First Ladies, Mrs. Carter, Mrs. Ford, and Mrs. Johnson. No generation before us since the suffragists had had a national conference of women's equality. And that's when we began to feel the power of Phyllis Schlafly's Stop ERA movement.
Not to be outdone, Schlafly staged her own rally, also in Houston, at the same time.
We feel that arena so full that the fire marshals made us stop, and they had to stand outside.
I'm opposed to the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm opposed to abortion. I'm opposed to the granting of so-called civil rights to homosexuals that would allow them to, say, teach in our schools.
The dueling rallies brought droves of reporters to Houston. Feminists wanted to take advantage of the national spotlight by presenting a broad agenda, including a plank to end discrimination based on sexual preference.
That lesbians have been in the closet too long.
But the gesture, long overdue as far as lesbians were concerned, backfired on the movement.
I watched this morning the corruption of young people in Albert Thomas Hall.
At Schlafly's convention across town, conservative Congressman Bob Dornan pounced.
And the greatest tragedy of all was to see 3 former first ladies of this nation approving of sexual perversion and the murder of young people in their mothers' wombs. What a disgrace!
We oppose the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. All in favor say aye.
Coming out of Houston, it was the anti-ERA forces that had captured the momentum.
The big turnout in Houston really said to the makers in Washington and the powers that be, this group of women in America do not want the Equal Rights Amendment.
Time ran out for the Equal Rights Amendment today. The 24-word statement pledging equality for women under the Constitution fell 3 states short of ratification.
I was brokenhearted that the Equal Rights Amendment didn't pass. I couldn't believe that it wouldn't.
The fact that it didn't pass just astounded me. In the eyes of the law, why shouldn't we be treated equally?
Though many discriminatory laws had already been struck down, the ERA's defeat meant that there was no blanket constitutional protection against such laws, now or in the future. It also meant that the pendulum of public opinion had swung back against the women's movement.